material inadequate, material, what's the right term, deficient, then I think we're probably using the wrong reason to eliminate a potential contractor. So I think my message to you is look at the broad picture, and I would like to have the opportunity to really look at the totality of the proposal and evaluate it on its merit. But if we disqualify it too early in this case, I definitely would classify it closer to a technicality as it is omission or disguise or anything else that some of you may want to suggest. So I'm going to be voting against the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, I have been patient, but Commissioner Bravo, we haven't heard from you, and I haven't chimed in yet. And I appreciate the public's patience. I would like to hear from Commissioner Parvenu. I can put you on the list. It's a very important discussion that we're having here because everyone understands the potential consequences of this motion. Commissioner Bravo.
Well, having been in a reasonably large corporation myself, if I had to answer that question, I would have gotten the chief financial officer to explain why I could not have provided the information. And I think if that was the case, the chief financial officer would have been happy to do so. I am having a hard time voting for this because I think there's other deviations in this proposal that I would like to have raised because I think it makes a stronger case. So I got to admit I'm kind of mixed on this one, but I don't agree that this is a minor event, and it could have been handled much better.
Commissioner Parvenu.
I can't possibly add more to what's been said already, so I won't rehash some of the reasons I'm having problems with this particular proposal, other than the key factor for me appeared on page 32, in addition to what Commissioner Blanco and Anchada and others have said before, under sources of funding. No sources of funding other than the CRC are anticipated, but it's that last sentence. The Institute's work and resources are fully funded by the Institute's work, which is fine, donations, and the Institute endowment. And it's been said before, but that's so vague, and I need to know who these donors are. I need to know who the contributors to the endowment are. It's vague, so I won't go at length repeating some of the same things that were said before, but on the record I wanted to at least voice my opinion and contribute to the discussion so we all know that I, too, have problems with this
Thank you, Commissioner Parvenu.
Can I add 1 second? It's one very quickly. This process is so vitally important that I don't want any surprises to appear later, so that individuals can question some of the donors and question whether or not these individuals have some influence on our line drawer, and it comes to a surprise to us. So it's vague, and this information, I'm repeating what's been said before. Sorry for belaboring the point, but that really did it for me. I don't want any surprises down the road later.
Thank you. I concur with Commissioner Yao. I believe that based on the inquiries that were made by this bidder, the Rose Institute, and the manner in which we responded to their inquiries, there was no other manner or means by which an institution of that size, well, first of all, the Rose Institute did not have any conflicts, nor does it have, as they had identified, any funding sources that represent a conflict with the institution's proposed work for the Commission. Granted, I understand that we are potentially putting that on faith, but it is a response to the inquiry that was made by the bidder, and it was in response to an inquiry that was made to Mr. Miller, as he had clarified earlier. This has been a good faith attempt based on the inquiry that was made, so I don't feel that there has been any lack of good faith in that regard. I also feel that there has been no intentional failure to disclose. I think we're dealing with an institution here where the request for information may not have been satisfactory to an institution such as this. Mr. Johnson has also made a comment that there may be tax prohibitions for nonprofit organizations to provide the detailed information that is sought here. Maybe we needed to see a further explanation in that regard. Commissioner Dye stated that this is black and white, but as I recall, during the process of becoming a commissioner, there were countless emails back and forth as to what constitutes a family member and what constitutes a family member. To me, I thought family member was black and white, but obviously it wasn't. And so I certainly don't see that this request for disclosure is black and white if fellow candidates for a commissioner couldn't even figure out what constitutes family member disclosure, let alone donors of an institution of this size. Any further comments on this issue? Commissioner Dye.
Yes, just to clarify, my black and white comment was specifically on being a paid member of legislative staff. There have been a couple of comments about the Rose Institute being part of a large institution, and there's a question in my mind. I tend to agree with Commissioner Baraba that while this is, I think, a very important factor and certainly constitutes a material deviation in my mind, that there are other deviations further down the page that actually worry me some more. And one of the questions that come up, and you can tell me if I'm out of order here, but there was a choice. Mr. Johnson had a choice of whether to do it as part of a large institution or to do it as part of National Demographics Corporation, which I assume is much smaller and actually were the ones that were cited as reference projects. So I think there was a conscious choice made here as to pick what entity to bid as, and so that just raises a whole host of questions in my mind in combination with non-disclosure or partial disclosure for Attachment 4.
It appears as if all commission members have had an opportunity to discuss this issue. Mr. Johnson, if you could step away from the podium, I would like to open it up for public comment on the motion on the floor, which is whether the deviation that we have been discussing constitutes a sufficiently material deviation to warrant failure of this bidder. Mr. Wright, thank you. And again, just real quickly, hands up on anybody who wants to speak on this motion. We have less than, okay, good. So basically we'll be at 5 minutes. And Janice will, again, keep track and let you know when you got a minute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jim Wright, a voter from San Jose again. I am apolitical. I'm registered Republican, but I vote whatever way I can. Okay, who makes best sense to the issue that makes the best sense to me, that's how I vote. I'm also non-legal. I have no legal training of any kind whatsoever. You've been debating a very interesting issue. Based on the reading of the staff notes, not the bid itself, okay, I haven't seen the bid, this appears to be a very sloppy bid. It appears to be quite incomplete. Non-professional comes to mind as a phrase to describe it. The issue of the donors, to me, a large donor, somebody contributing a large amount of money, can very easily cause a swing in the function, the focus, and the action of an organization. And not knowing those bidders, not knowing what possible influence they just might have, and big if that they might have, is something that is of great concern to me as a citizen. There appear to be significant and important omissions to donors. Some obfuscation, an attempt to hide, perhaps, of information about the people that might work on it and their potential conflicts. And I agree very loudly with Commissioner Parvenu, no surprises later. The unknowns are issues that there are people in the society will jump on and they could cause all kinds of problems for the commission later. I've got high hopes for this commission. Please vote yes on the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Another member of the public? Mr. Salivary, is that correct?
Yeah, David Salivary from Berkeley. I've been listening very carefully, and I think that you've been heading deep into the weeds. I think it begins to sound like you're trying to undress the Rose Institute financially, and if they're resisting, I'm not surprised. Mr. Forbes just now spoke about his fears of some type of I guess, an investigative reporter finding out stuff about the Rose Institute. And it's clear to me that he's imagining and fearing everything from the point of view, as I'm trying to make this point, of the left. And, perhaps the Chronicle, will find something, et cetera. But, again, the perspective is skewed towards the perceptions of the left. And I, again, want you to consider the perceptions of the other side, which is that this process begins to look like a political cavity search and a murder by 1,000 cuts of an institution that is probably, very grounded in its work and very reliable in the product that it turns out. On a personal level, I watched as Doug Johnson of McKenna and Corinne McDonald of UC Berkeley had a pleasant conversation during the break. And I want the public to know that these two people at a personal level seem to trust each other and to get along fairly well. I have come to believe that either of them will probably provide honest maps. And for two reasons. First of all, because they both have personal integrity. And second of all, because there's going to be so many eyes on this process that nobody's going to let them get away with anything. So, again, I want you to please consider the perceptions of the other side, and don't be so tribal in your politics and tribal in how you're viewing these proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salivary. Any other member of the public? Gentleman in the back.
Hello, my name is Chris Chafee. I'm from Sacramento, and I just wanted to urge you to vote yes for the motion. I think your staff has identified 7 deviations in their report, and these were not technicalities, as many of you have already noted. And I mean, just talking about the issues of disclosure, 5 of the 17 members, or almost a third, have worked for elected officials in the past 10 years, and indeed some of them for members of the legislature, like you've already noted. Also, the Rose Institute, as this discussion has been going on for, over an hour, failed to disclose their donors. And that might be a legal technicality that they can use. But I think what's interesting is that Doug Johnson owns a redistricting firm that's a small business. And he controls those disclosures and the information to give it to you so that it's upfront and has a light of day. And I think because this body is supposed to be a very transparent and open source that people can look to in the public, that not disclosing their donors is a material deviation and is sufficient to fail the bid outright. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chafee. Any other member of the public?
Good afternoon. My name is Alan Payton. I'm chairman of the Contra Costa Redistricting Task Force, and I'll want to speak later during the regular public comments. Specifically on this, am I correct? There's only been 2 bidders?
Correct.
Okay. So from a issue of Solomon splitting the baby, if there's a way that the two can be worked together. So there's the issue away from partisanship from this commission, and they both have talents, they both have abilities. Perhaps this commission should direct the two to work together and form one bid.
Thank you, Mr. Any other member of the public?
Hi, my name is Natalie Rojas. I now live in Davis, California, but I have been a voter in Fresno when I first turned 18, and then also in Santa Cruz County. So I've been all over the state. Basically, this question is about process and whether the Rose Institute followed that process by answering the question in a material sufficient way, so that the commission, and of course the public can make sound decisions in the future for the district lines. They did not. They chose not to follow the process by providing enough information for the public and for the commission. And so I feel that that you should vote yes on this motion and fail the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of the public that wish to address the commission, please come forward. And Claypool, are we still waiting for others? Thank you.
Hello. My name is Nick Capistrano, and I am a regular voter in the 5th Assembly District. I've been a regular voter since I was 18, so just a little background. As a part of your IFB, the applicants were asked to disclose any funding that they received in the past 10 years. The Rose Institute flatly refused, stating that they didn't have time or because none of their but they told you not to worry because none of their funding sources represent any sort of conflict with the Institute's proposed work for the Commission, and which basically, to me, as a member of the public, that's saying that their judgment should supersede yours. And does that matter? And does it not? It's not my place to say, and neither is it theirs. This Commission made this IFB for a reason, and it is the responsibility to maintain and protect the public trust. And in my opinion, the Rose Institute has violated that trust. And because of that, I would strongly urge you to vote yes on this proposal. I mean, on this motion, and to reject their bid. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Capistrano. Any other member of the public that wishes to address this commission? See none, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. First of all, I understand what you're looking at and the position you're in, and I'm glad I'm not sitting up there. I do want to emphasize, I'm not asking this commission to take these statements on faith. The Claremont McKenna College is audited. We are fully subject to the IRS, and as an academic institution, our tax status depends on following those laws, and those laws mean no advocacy, no partisan intent. You may not know this, but actually in the 1980s, the Franchise Tax Board actually investigated Claremont McKenna and spent a couple of years pouring through the books. It's actually the only known FTB investigation that ended with a letter of apology for ever starting it. They actually admitted that it was started by people who politically were mad at us. And were very powerful enough to start an FTB investigation. So I'm not asking you to take this on faith. I'm asking you to take this on the belief that the IRS does a very thorough job of what it does. The other piece is that we were as responsive as humanly possible. Keep in mind the timing here. This proposal this invitation to bid came out on Monday. We immediately, within 24 hours, sent in the question about this item. We saw it immediately. We said, whoa, you're asking for a ton of information. The response to that came out, I think, on Friday or Saturday. I mean, that's when the answers came out. We had to have this in FedEx to the Commission on Monday. So to the question of could we have given a limited list of donors, the biggest donors, the key projects, that was, that could have been the answer to our question when we said, do you want everything? And I understand there was misunderstanding of who we really were and perhaps misperception of the answer. But the answer was, we need everything. There was no flexibility. If we failed to give the entire database of every donor at Claremont McKenna College, then we were not responsive or we weren't fulfilling the spirit of the question. So we gave as much as we possibly could. But let me be clear. This is a vote to reject us on the fact that we could not provide an entire database of Claremont McKenna's donors for the last 10 years in 36 hours. 36 hours while we were having a Board of Trustees meeting. So, Commissioner Bravo, trust me, we had those CFOs. We had to bring the treasurer in from the trustee meeting out of town just to sign this. This would have been, we were as humanly as responsive as humanly and legally possible. And my apologies, I didn't think this was going to be this big an issue, or I would have brought the legal team and the development team here to explain all the issues and laws that go into a request such as this of an institution such as Claremont McKenna College. So, I mean, I am happy to provide whatever we can that would address your concerns. We provided everything we possibly could in the maybe 48 hours of the weekend. I think it was closer to 36 hours that we had to get this back to you. So if being unable to deliver the college's entire database of donors in under 48 hours disqualifies us, we have to live with that. And why did I bid this as Rose? Because this is an enormous project. I thought it would be useful to have the resources of the college behind us that we could draw on. That's why we bid this as Rose and not as National Demographics. You know, the idea that you can do this project with a small business enterprise that has done less than one project a year for the last 10 years, I don't know how they would do it. That's part of the reason I propose that we join together, especially now that you're looking at 66 meetings between now and August 15th. So there was no attempt to hide anything, as one of the speakers just mentioned, by doing this as Rose. It was an effort to bring to this commission the resources that it's going to need to get this job done. So I'm happy to provide anything we can. I'm happy to provide anything we can. But just please, as you take this vote, remember, we got that answer that we sought clarification on. Are you really asking for everything? And yes, we were all working, staff and us were all working so crazy fast, it wasn't perfectly clear in our question or in their answer. But we were told you have essentially 48 hours over the weekend to deliver your college's entire database. We failed to do that. We provided as much information as we could possibly give you in that limited
30
time.
seconds.
So if that disqualifies us, we'll live with that. But hopefully we can find a way. Thank you.
I don't think so. Yes, Mr. Miller. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Claypool, do we have an ETA of other members of the public who wish to address the commission?
No, we do not.
Okay. Any other members of the public who wish to address the commission? Please come forward.
My name is Eddie Kirby. I live in Sacramento. Actually, I was just wanted to mention, I know that Robert Hertzberg is a member of the board of directors, and that wasn't really mentioned, but I mean, he was mayor of L.A., influential Democrats, probably raising a lot of money for Claremont. So, I don't know exactly how that plays into you guys deciding, but it seems like there's a lot of research that could be done into who has influence over what the Rose Institute does, and it, because they didn't very easily list this, your staff wasn't able to look into that stuff, and you guys aren't really able to make a solid decision on what influences play, and that goes kind of in contrary to what you guys as a commission, I think, are trying to do, which is open up government, and so I just wanted to share that thought. I think that they should that you should say yes on this motion that's been proposed, because I think that they obviously didn't seem to care too much about that core mission of transparency.
Thank you, Mr. Kirby. Any other member of the public who wishes to address the commission on this motion? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the commission. Ask Ms. Sargis to read back the motion.
The motion is, the bidder's response to the conflict and impartiality statement constitutes a sufficient material deviation and thus would warrant a failed score of the bid.
I'd like a roll call vote, please. This does not require supermajority.
Commissioner Aguirre? Commissioner Anchetta?
Yes.
Commissioner Baraba? Yes. Commissioner Blanco?
Yes.
Commissioner Dye?
Yes.
Commissioner DiGiulio?
Yes.
Commissioner Filkins-Weber?
No.
Commissioner Forbes?
Yes.
Commissioner Columbus-Malloy,
Yes.
Commissioner Antai, Commissioner Parvenu,
Yes.
Commissioner Raya,
No.
Commissioner Ward,
No.
Commissioner Yao.
No.
The motion passes. 9 ayes.
Thank you. As part of our process, pursuant to the bid evaluation, the result of this motion is a finding that there was a material deviation for which the Rose Institute did not provide a responsive bid, and therefore such constitutes a failure to move forward with the second determination of where we would open the bids. At this point, as I understand it, we would consider opening the bid of the remaining candidate. Is that correct, or does it?
We can certainly open the bid of the remaining candidate to their, so that the commission knows that part of the process. Would you like me to do that?
Let's make sure we have clarity of process before we go any further. As I understand it, this is the next and necessary step, that the bid would be opened, and then the commission has an opportunity to determine whether the bid constitutes a responsible bidder if they possess the experience, facilities, reputation, financial resources, and are fully capable of performing the contract. Because this is not a circumstance of other similar state contracting where the remaining candidate and remaining, bid that's opened as far as the cost goes, that there would be an immediate vote for an award. Am I correct?
I stand corrected. You are correct. We do need to open the cost bid, and you do need to examine that and make a decision as to whether you determine that entity to be a responsible bidder.
That's correct. So we do have, it's 4 o'clock, we do have a considerable amount of time. This is not a circumstance where, and the members of the public need to understand this as well, the prior vote, and the commission members need to understand that, the prior vote does not necessarily mean that an award will be granted to Q2. We need to open the cost sealed request, or whatever it was that we had requested, and make a determination of whether Q2, as the final bidder, is also responsible. Excuse me? Let the record reflect that Mr. Claypool is holding almost a banker's box, and appears to be properly. While staff is opening this, a few commission members have asked that we take a brief recess. How about 5 minutes, and take a bio break, as we've called it before. So we will take a recess and have this open. Thank you. We are back in session, the Citizens Redistricting Commission, following a brief break. And just to recap, we have now opened the sealed box from Q2 Data and Research, and the cost, I want to make sure I'm saying that, it hasn't been passed to you yet. This is the cost section of the bids, which has been opened and presented to each commission member as we speak. And just for the public's information, just before our recess, when the box was immediately opened, it contained it appeared to be the CD that was requested from the respondent, and that CD has been taken over to the Redistricting Commission's office headquarters, and thankfully, now that we have control of our website, it is being downloaded, is my understanding, as we speak. So members of the public that are watching this will have an opportunity shortly, and I hope Ms. Sargis will probably receive confirmation from the office that it's been downloaded and on the web. Okay, just send them an email or whatever you do. So we'll take a few minutes. Mr. Claypool, are there copies for the members of the audience here now, or how are we working that out?
If there are some copies, I will distribute them.
Okay. So the commission members will take an opportunity to review this themselves, and members in the audience here can maybe share or pass around.
No greater than 500,000. Right. They qualify if there had been a receipt of much sense. Right. Right.
I can't tell if she's included any attendance at the meetings.
Required.
Doesn't. It'd be nice if she said in the bid that it
That's something they need to ask her about.
Mr. Claypool and Mr. Miller, I have a question that was raised by Commissioner DeGiulio as well, and I wondered, is there to be a determination, or is that expected by the Commission as we're reviewing it, that the cost portion is a technical component of the responsive, or is it? I mean, do we need to look at those factors of QT that staff recognized could not be previously verified, and then determine that they have been verified with the information that's presently been submitted? Do you know what I mean? No.
Okay. Yeah. From the original document that we gave you, there were two portions that spoke to cost. Is that what you're
Yes. For instance, on the evaluation, page 5, the bidder cost worksheet says, for instance, not verified yet. So for completeness sake of our evaluation of bidder, do we need as a commission, or will staff be confirming that that's been complied with, I guess satisfactorily, based on the fact that I've never opened a cost before?
It should be confirmed. We have Raul Villanueva has gone back over to the office. We're going to bring him back, and he would be the one that would have the most specific knowledge to ensuring that we've met the requirements.
Okay, and he's on his way back?
As soon as we can send him that
Thank you.
text. Thanks. Here's the cost for the input hearing. Here's the cost for the bottom line. Yeah, so she's.
I can't tell.
What?
For sure. Oh, that includes this.
Chairperson Filkins Weber.
Yes.
No.
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we consider Q2's responsiveness portion of the proposal to be fully in compliance.
Does anyone question that, or
based on the data that I've received, I don't believe we necessarily need a staff report to confirm the fact that they have met all the cost input.
I don't know that
that motion.
I wasn't certain it needed a motion unless there was some other question or concern of any other commission member prior to verification of staff who's been working with DGS. If everyone feels confident that it's been responsive, I don't know that it needs a motion, but.
My only concern, it's not a huge concern. By looking at it, it seems to be quite complete. I just don't know on a technical matter, whether there was, is there supposed to be a cover sheet or signature or things like that. It may not be, it may be a slight deviation, but I just would like to dot our I's and cross our T's. We were talking about process. I would rather err on the side of being slightly redundant. That's my 2 points.
For the members of the public, I have confirmation that the cost bid is posted online, so they may review it as we are at this time in real time.
Mr. Claypool, can I
Yes.
get verification
Okay.
on the number of input hearings plus commission meetings? I think we're going to need to take the option. Was that correct? Because the base cost includes 18 public input hearings and 10 commission meetings.
Yes, and in fact, when we ask for the optional, the additional hearings, we will, for the commission meetings, we will be expanding that number because we've looked after talking with different individuals who are familiar with this process, and you'll see that there are far more than the 20 meetings that we had originally proposed. I think it's closer to 26. So we will be using the optional per meeting costs to work with whichever bidder, because that is awarded this, if it's Q2 or whomever, and we'll expand into that. And then we also will have this will be the total number for the actual input hearings, the 10, because it was 18 plus 10 is the 30, actually 20.
28?
Actually, it was 28, and the 10 makes 38.
Okay. So, and I believe the...
I'm sorry, I think I'm not with you just yet. I just want to make sure I'm with you, because I don't recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, was there any outline? That's where I'm a little confused, where it says the optional costs would include 10 additional, but I don't know what's included in the total fixed cost. So is that what you were just getting at? It's 28?
If you look on page 4, under fixed costs, in that paragraph, it says it includes 18 public input hearings and 10 commission meetings, and that was in the original bid. That's what they were asked to bid on. And then we asked for an option because we weren't sure how many we were going to do, and it looks like we're going to have to take the option because we want to do pretty broad outreach. So we have...
We are at 38 outreach, and how many?
28...
This would take us to 28. We will have to expand the contract to an additional 10 using the optional cost to get us to our 38.
And for commission meetings, the total that we would ultimately look at? Because this is for 10.
Right, and then...
sorry.
No, I'm sorry, that's not necessarily correct. This says 18 only of public input hearings, only 18. So
right.
And this cost analysis is separating the commission meetings. Now, I'm wondering... And it's not clear because on our calendar we do have some input hearings that flow into commission meetings on the same day,
right,
which might be a little problematic. But so as I read this, it's 18 public input hearings, and in comparison to what we were considering right now, it's only 18 only. So then we would have to add the additional 10 to even get to 28 first.
Absolutely.
Right.
And then we're going to need an additional 10. Now, in our budget right now, in our budget right now, we have the $500,000 for this contract, and then we have an additional $200,000 that we use on contingency. So that was the original. We had originally talked about having a budget of $750, but then when we redid the budget, we wanted to have it based on $500,000. And then we asked them for the optional cost. The reason we went with the 18 and the 10 was because we wanted to be able to compare apples with apples when we had different contractors here, but still have the flexibility to expand into the additional meetings that we were planning, because we couldn't be certain how many they were or there would be. So when you look at this bid, we will get all of our. We will get 28 of our commission hearings, and I believe virtually all of or 28 of our public input hearings, and virtually all of our commission hearings in this quote, and then we're going to have to add in an additional 10 meetings, but at this per meeting cost, it's still not going to go anywhere near the $700,000 that we have in our budget to do this with.
Right.
But we would still maintain that $700,000 in our budget against the possibility that there would be more meetings, as Commissioner Yao has pointed out, and accurately so. If we get down to the end of this process and we need to have more meetings, we need to have the funding for them.
And the other thing I wanted to point out for the benefit of the commission, I believe that the commission meetings were originally envisioned to all happen in Sacramento, and that looks like that may not be a reasonable assumption moving forward as we try to combine them so we're all in the same place at the same time. So there may be some additional travel costs, but it's not going to be a material difference.
Chairman? Chairman?
Yeah.
Another thing. We had said in that calendar that we gave you that everything was in Sacramento. Now, if we presume, and I'm only presuming, that Q2 is awarded the contract, it may very well be a wiser place to meet to be in the Bay Area. It has the same transportation system, but it is where they're set up. There could be, just an ease of operation there. But we can certainly meet anywhere this commission wants. But I just wanted to say that Sacramento that's written in there isn't chiseled in stone. We are looking at some venues here that would be not as nice as the venues we've been provided so far, but or should I say regal, but they would certainly be more media friendly for us, including McGeorge Law School. So once the commission makes a decision as to where it would like to meet with its line drawer, when that's all we're doing, then we would be prepared to move forward for a location there.
At this time, do any of the other commission members have any questions regarding the cost? And we'll get more to further process, or at least while everyone's looking, it doesn't look like anybody has any urgent questions. Just as a reminder, excuse me, at this point we are in the second phase, essentially, of making a determination. Unlike other bids where at least as I understand it, it would automatically be awarded. This is a process where we have an opportunity to determine if the bidder is now considered a responsible bidder based on the cost analysis that has been provided. In particular, the bid evaluation guide that we went over yesterday, I will reiterate for the members of the public that may not have it before them, or other commission members that may not have it before them. We now, in this phase, consider whether the bidder is responsible if they possess the experience, facilities, reputation, financial resources, and are fully capable of performing the contract. So now we can take a look at based on the bid that was submitted, whether based on the cost that we have in front of us, this is a responsible proposal from this bidder based on experience, facilities, reputation, financial resources, and again, whether they are fully capable of performing the contract. So I would like to open the floor up to the opportunity of any commission member to address this second aspect of this bid. And let me get to my paper so I can write down everybody's.
Sure. Clarification. We are looking at both the cost and the original proposal at this point.
Yes, you can go. Yes, it's opening it up. We don't want to get back into the material deviation and the things that might have been. In fact, there wasn't anything pointed out as far as the deviation with this contract. So now we're looking at it more substantively in a determination based on the cost that has been presented to us. If you feel that the bidder is fully capable of performing the contract in total. So we have been provided this opportunity through recognition of the Department of General Services and the Legal Services Division of the Department of General Services to consider this bidder more fully.
So I did have a question regarding process. So I think Ms. Johnson, and I'm relying on something Mr. Johnson said, but I simply want to just get some clarification, because it sounded like when we were doing the first stage that we really had to limit ourselves to the four corners of what was in the bid. Right, and I took it it took some remarks to say that we could look beyond that in terms of other data or other information beyond what was in the bid itself and the evaluation. Is that correct? Or
That is correct, and I'm a far cry from Ms. Johnson because she's far more knowledgeable. However, this is the portion where you can branch out and take those things into consideration with regards to the totality of the bid, not necessarily just what was placed in the bid itself.
So if I could just continue then, unless there's some other clarifying questions others have, I'll just go to that. So since we can look maybe a little bit further in terms of the bigger picture. One issue that I've always had with Q2 is sort of identity questions and the relationship between Q2 and the statewide database and the redistricting group. And my major concern is resources and the ability of the Q2 team, given that the identity issues here, that they run the statewide database or they work at the Warren Institute. I believe Ms. Henderson, for example, is also a PhD student at Berkeley. Whether given all of those responsibilities, and I don't know what's happening in terms of all those other things, that's not in the bid, whether they can do all the work. I have full confidence in their ability to do it if they have the time to do it, but I'm not entirely clear given what we know are other responsibilities. Certainly the statewide database is clearly a large responsibility. That in terms of being responsible, that they can do it. That's been my biggest question, biggest set of concerns.
On a process question, are we permitted in this portion of the consideration of the bid to ask for further clarification from the bidder? Mr. Miller or Mr. Claypool?
In the same manner that we sought clarification previously, we should pursue that approach.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Anchetta, would you like to address Ms. McDonald for further clarification on the bid?
If she heard,
she is here.
I heard my general concerns. I don't have anything to add.
She may not have been paying attention.
I'm sorry.
No, sorry. Ms. McDonald, will you please approach the commission so that Mr. Anchetta can clarify his question?
Okay, so you're heading the statewide database.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I go ahead and finish your question, and then I'd like to.
And I'm only repeating this if you didn't hear it earlier.
I did hear it.
Okay, well then go ahead. How do you respond to that?
And if you could refer to your submission and augment and explain that portion of your submission regarding capacity to do the work.
I can do that. Thank you. Yes, we wear a lot of hats, and a lot of redistrictors, as few of us as there are, actually wear a lot of hats. As you saw from our documents, all of us have done consulting work outside of the work that we do regularly when there is neither, EAC contracts going on or redistricting work to be done. So we're quite used to that. I can assure you that I grilled every single member of this team, and there were actually a couple of members that ended up not being part of the proposal because we did not think that they would have the time, basically, and the resources, because we're also talking about childcare and things like that, because we're going to be on the road a lot if we, if we're going to get this contract. So we looked at this in detail and grilled each other and figured out, who would cover the meetings and all this. And again, as I've stated before, I haven't had time to take any vacation time. So as soon as the data are out, basically we're in the process. We just got the census data, as you know. The PL 94-171 was just delivered. So the next couple of weeks are going to be pretty busy for us as I'm, fielding a lot of the county's questions that deal with geography, inconsistencies and whatnot, and I have lots of them. I've been working diligently to get all of that off my plate. I have done, I've worked with you before, and I've been, available on the spur of the moment, so that is definitely something that I can deliver. And the same is true for my team, and we delivered I thought, pretty substantial piece of work in terms of this bid with a small business in a very, very tiny amount of time with no resources of a large institution behind us. So it was difficult to do, but we can do it. So I would not have submitted this bid had I not thought that we were all completely capable of meeting these time commitments.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald.
Thank you.
I'll put you in line. Commissioner Dye.
Yeah, I just wanted to
ensure that that included the optional part, since it looks like we have an additional option on top of that option that may be required.
Correct. We actually did look at the optional part, and that is something, the optional ones that we bid on is actually something that we figured out we could do within this particular staff. If there are additional optional meetings, then we may actually go back to those 2 staff members that had told us they could only work part-time and ask them whether they are going to be available to do some of those and help out. And we would, of course, give you the resumes and make sure that they are approved by you and that they go through the exactly same process. And I will just say that whoever I would put onto this project has the same basic qualifications that anybody else has. So there's not going to be anybody who hasn't had a mouse with, a redistricting mapping program on the screen. That's just not going to happen. These people have all have statewide experience, and they all have data experience, and they all know how to map.
Thank you.
Commissioner Yao.
The option. We don't even know what they are at this point in time. As you may notice, that when we tried to pin down the outreach meeting or the input meeting, we were still debating as to whether it's all weekends, and took us hours of discussion before we can reach concurrence on the first 2 weeks in April. So with those, I know you bid on a different set of statement of work as compared to what's facing you. Have you been watching those input days, and do you feel you can respond to us on these very uncertain and changing demands?
Absolutely, and I appreciate the question. I think what you see from our references and also the 2 reference projects that we presented to you is that we're extremely responsive, and that's really why I think those projects went that well. And in San Francisco, I think even the commissioner noted that we probably didn't sleep, and I tell you, we didn't. I don't know how we did it, but we really didn't. And I am fully prepared. I mean, I always tell people, when you're in redistricting, you sleep in the years ending with 4 through 8, roughly, and better get a good vacation in the year ending with 9, and then, cancel all of your appointments, dates, and movie schedules.
Thank you. Any other commission member have any questions of Ms. McDonald? Thank you, Mrs. McDonald. Any further discussion regarding the experience, reputation, financial resources, or capability of performing this contract in order to determine whether Q2 is a responsible bidder? Commissioner DeGiulio?
I just wanted to make just a brief comment in regards to that in reading this proposal, I appreciated, I should say, within the scope of work, I liked how the proposal was broken down into a clear understanding for me as to how the bidder envisioned undertaking his actual line drawings in relationship to the meetings. And I think it was mentioned earlier by Ms. Johnston, assigning an individual staff member to a region, which I think is a wonderful access point for the public to have a familiar face. I felt that element, as well as a few others, it was very clear for me to understand what was being presented, and therefore I could make a judgment as to whether I thought that would meet our needs. I was appreciative of how well it was laid out, and particularly I like the way it's structured in terms of the actual regional approach and the justification for why certain individuals had more large regions and based on population, and I think that's a very feasible thing for Q2 data and research to undertake, and it would meet our needs and still provide the public a good access point.
Thank you. Any other commissioner? Commissioner Blanco.
I would like to hear a little bit more. We really haven't talked about that regional approach, and I was also struck by it. I mean, it seemed to address some of the concerns we had about how to remain responsive to regions when we would be going in and out. and then coming back. And I just wanted to hear a little bit more, I think, about that and how then that all gets amalgamated into one body of information. If Ms. McDonald could talk about that, because I like it, but I'm just wondering how it all comes back together.
Thank you. Excuse me. So yes, when I looked at this, really, I looked at it as a problem, right? So you have a problem of time constraints, lots of input, multiple district layers, and there was also a financial constraint, obviously. I mean, as I said to Mr. Claypool earlier, had you put a 1 in front of the bid, you would have had many more bidders. There would have been some national firms probably bidding on this. And depending on, what your resources and all those constraints are, you have to figure out just the best way, just with any other project that you do. You look at the best way to approach that, to do the best possible job that you can. So we decided that the best approach would be to have 4 mappers, basically, that are responsible for roughly a quarter of the state. So each mapper is going to be responsible for drawing each level of district. So it will be AD, SD, Board of Equalization, and congressional districts, right? We felt that when the public input comes back and the direction comes back from you, that mapper could be much more responsive to questions from you, suggestions from you. If that mapper is sitting here, for example, and you have a question about whether in this particular congressional district, can you move the city in there? And then will that particular city, will that cause some sort of a ripple effect? Can we do X, Y, and Z? Because that mapper is going to become, that mapper is going to become an expert on that particular area. The responsiveness of that expert to quick changes, which I'm sure will have to be made, and to questions from you, will just make that mapper more responsive. And I think there's going to be a much better public record on what actually was done in that particular area, because you don't have a lot of handoffs. Now, when we were doing the statewide plans for those 2 site redistricting projects that I supervised for California, the academic projects, right, we used a different methodology and tried it out. We basically had people drawing just whole entire states, and we also had part-time staff, and I could tell you that did not work very well because people were not as knowledgeable about what they were doing, because they had to familiarize themselves with the entire state rather than just with a quarter of the state, which is a whole lot easier to do, and it's just quicker, especially during this time-constrained area, right? And there were also, the errors would go up. Because we had part-timers that couldn't really focus on it. So what we did is we basically picked people that can really dedicate their time to those quarters. And the one backdraw of doing quarters of California is that it requires more management, because somebody has to stand there and basically figure out where the handoffs are, okay? Because you can't just take a quarter and just say, okay, we're going to draw that line in the same place, because you have population equality, obviously. You have all these redistricting criteria, and you have different ideal populations depending on the district level that you're dealing with. So you have to have somebody there who basically just makes sure that the 2 people that are working on bordering regions, I call them just regional coordinators, are communicating properly so that handoff can happen. And we've tried it out just because I wanted to, make sure it really worked. We've done some exercises, and it works. And does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a brief interruption, if you pardon me. I failed to mention to the members of the public that are here is that the Capitol closes at 5. So as long as you're inside, we are still going to go, and I have no idea how long we will go, but just keep in mind, if you would like to remain for public comments when we can get to them, which we will get to them today, just be certain not to leave the building after 5, because you will not get back in. So I apologize for that. Trying to run the meeting and dig into this material at the same time. So any other commission members have any requests for clarification from Ms. McDonald? You can stay here, Ms. McDonald. I'm certain somebody will come up. I don't want to keep you coming back and forth. I might have a few questions in a moment, but Commissioner Geary.
Yes, hi, Karen. within the outreach committee, you may or may not be aware that we've been setting up a calendar that includes quite intense in scheduling during the coming months. I mean, quite aggressive, actually. And within that, part of the question was, how much of an emphasis do you put on weekends? How intensely do you target Section 5 counties? How many times do you go back there? What are the considerations in terms of translation, availability, and all that? Could you kind of like talk around Section 5 and where that fits within the schedule? Do you try to hit it at least 2 times, 3 times?
Well, I would most certainly place a particular emphasis on Section 5 counties, and I've discussed this with Anna, and I will make sure Anna is here the next time, perhaps when you're discussing this, so that she can help you prepare a proper plan, because she is the expert on Section 5, because she's worked on it extensively. Part of Section 5 is definitely that you have sufficient opportunity for the communities there to provide input. Right. So I would absolutely encourage you to start early. Most of there's 3 Section 5 counties that are actually in one of the regions, the way I've broken up the regions for the mappers. So, I wouldn't be opposed to, if I'm being asked, I wouldn't be opposed to going there quite frequently, and most certainly make sure that we're close to those counties whenever there's regional outreach. Maybe place some of the meetings there. So I think the more the better.
Right.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Ncheta.
A related question, because we are looking at overall cost savings, of course. So we just hired our Voting Rights Act counsel yesterday, and we're trying to lower those costs if we can. So I wasn't trying, and this may be in the bid, but we're trying to, as much as possible, I guess, try to minimize some of the expenses to that council in terms of attending meetings. So to the extent you've outlined Ms. Henderson as a team player, member of your team, and I'm not clear exactly how many meetings she would be attending, because in the big picture, that could save us some money. So Gibson Dunn wouldn't have to be there, but they could be in conversation with Ms. Henderson. So how does that work with
I think I should clarify that Anna Henderson is not really a member of the team as an attorney. Okay? So she's not...
Oh, no, and I don't necessarily expect her to play the role, because we have Gibson Dunn for it.
Yes,
right.
You're getting a little extra experience, yes, as part of Anna's participation.
But to the extent that, again, not playing the role of attorney at the meeting, but to the extent that she is an informed and experienced, has a legal background, and is aware of many of these issues, and could convey some of that information to the council. I guess I'm asking, how much is she going to be going to the meetings? Because it might, in fact, save us a little bit of money with Gibson Dunn going to all the meetings if we had her reporting back what's going on. Although, again, there may be certain meetings like the Section 5 counties where everybody ought to be there, or the statewide meetings. Everybody should be there. But there may be a lot of meetings where we wouldn't need Gibson Dunn to go there because Anna would be able, again, not playing attorney, but simply would be able to spot the issues and convey that information. This is the work between the consultant and the attorney, of course. So I'm wondering if your team covers some of the things where we might have asked counsel to go just to listen in.
I definitely had the conversation with Anna about covering as many of the Section 5 county hearings and meetings as possible. We haven't looked at the calendar to see whether or not she will be going to all of them or how many of them. So I think she and I, because it's going to be either her or me, that's going to be at one of every meeting, really. So, but Anna has a kid, I have dogs, so we juggle these things between dog sitters and babysitters, and we will, once we figure out when we're going to be where exactly, then I would say Anna and I will sit down and figure it out, and we will absolutely keep that in mind.
Okay, and that's helpful because it sounds like you're sort of tag teaming in terms of attendance.
Yes,
Okay.
and that was part of,
That's
you
good.
know, how we looked at all of these, just being able to meet the requirements and really making sure that we're there when you need us.
Right.
And that was a big piece of it, was that there is going to be backup.
Right, and I would note that, again, Ms. Henderson is a PhD candidate in the Jurisprudence and Social Policy program. I think has a fair amount of quantitative training through that.
She has a lot of quantitative training. Yeah, actually, well, both of us, I mean, I'm on leave from a PhD program as well, so we both have a fair amount of quantitative training. And because Anna is advanced to candidacy, she actually doesn't have to take classes or do a whole lot right now.
Very good. That's good to know.
Cruise time. I hope none of her advisors are listening.
Commissioner DiGiulio.
To follow up on this point of Commissioner Anchetta, if we as a commission go forward with Q2, I would like to see the Legal Advisory Committee be able to present to the full commission after, in conjunction with our technical consultant, our VRA attorneys, VRA team, to give us an idea of the full commission as what you think would be appropriate for Anna Henderson to attend and what you think would be necessary, because I think that level of, we need to make sure we're covered, and I would be, I'm hoping to task the Legal Advisory Committee to give us a full report as a commission about that, and after coordination with all the parties.
Do you want that for next week? I'm serious. We're meeting next week.
Yes, if we go forward, I would like that to happen next week. Thank you.
Made a note of it. Commissioner Dye.
Yeah, and in fact, to pile on to that, in conjunction with, Mr. Miller and Ms. Johnson, too, in terms of what staff role could be in that, because I am extremely excited about the bonus of having someone who's a DOJ attorney who's worked in Section 2 and Section 5 on our line drawing team to potentially save us a lot of money on the legal side.
I don't necessarily see it that way. We spent a considerable time yesterday and Tuesday and Thursday interviewing counsel who we have selected to render an opinion regarding the Voters' Rights Act. I don't know Ms. Henderson, and if there's any other disclosures, which I think they've already been made among the commission members. So I hold a different opinion in that regard, but legal advisory will take that up. I have a few questions for you. Ms. McDonald, given that this portion of the consideration of the bid allows us to consider your reputation, financial resources, and whether you have the capability of performing this contract, some of the public comments, one in particular, is that Ms. McDonald has never drawn district lines on a statewide basis and therefore lacks experience to perform such a significant task. Please provide further clarification among the materials that were sent to you or in response. Based on the bid that you've submitted, can you please provide further clarification in response to this public comment so that we can appropriately determine whether you are fully capable of performing this contract given the evidence of the potential lack of experience on a statewide basis?
Absolutely. As part of the bid, if you refer to my CV, you will see that there are two projects. One is about the implication of competition in California redistricting. I'm not getting the title right here. So it's the competition study. And about a year later, there was a nesting study. These were both academic, statewide redistricting projects. So they were academic. They were not contracted by the state of California. Of course, had I been working for the state of California, I would not be sitting here. So I designed both of them. I hired the people that worked on them. I supervised and implemented basically both of these projects. They were both statewide. They were widely peer-reviewed in the academic community as well as actually in the political community because, as you probably can imagine, when somebody talks about competition, everybody was going, okay, what are the results? What does this really do? So this was a California-specific project, and I, for the next couple of years, really, at every conference was telling people that they can't necessarily take those particular findings and apply them to their state because California is a very specific state based on how we live and how we self-sort, and because we're just a very high minority state, we have a lot of languages, there's a lot going on here that doesn't go on in other states, and we're just very big, And then also we have certain geographies, and there were just a lot of criteria interactions. So those are two statewide projects that I did, and as I said earlier, I could have done a better job job highlighting those in my CV. And I didn't, but they're in there. And you will also note that there were a few of the Q2 team members that are part of this bid that also worked on those particular projects, namely Alex Woods and Tamina Alon, who's right behind me. Both worked on those. Anna Henderson has statewide experience via her employment at the Department of Justice, where she reviewed statewide Section 5 cases. And I just wrote down the states and
I didn't see any reference to California. I may have
No, it was not
overlooked
California.
So, okay.
No, she did not
So she's
review.
never done any Section 5 pre-clearance review for the DOJ of any area or any county that was subject to that in the state of California?
Certainly not statewide, and I am not sure. She didn't mention it. I think she would have probably mentioned it, so I'm guessing that she did not.
Well, I don't see any reference to any California
Correct.
county that's subject to Section 5.
Correct.
Okay.
Then she probably didn't. And Nicole Boyle worked for the special masters in the Arizona redistricting, so once they were actually in court, Nicole got all the files, and she was working on the statewide redistricting for Arizona, and that's also in her resume.
Thank you. One other question that I do have for you for further clarification. You have been privy to the other public comments that have been posted online, and in that regard, you have submitted some responses. One, and I, again, may have overlooked it because, trust me, we've gotten plenty of public comments, but I'd like further clarification regarding, we do have, in the city of San Diego, the project that you had done for them, we had received one public comment commending you for your work, while at the same time we've received another public comment challenging your work in that regard. And again, this goes to your reputation. Your reputation was being challenged by the criticism suggesting that you had intentionally packed Republicans into a particular area. Can you provide further explanation? Because as much as you've provided a response to all of the criticism that you have received, I never saw you respond to that particular public comment, or if you know what they're referring to.
I actually didn't see that public comment. I have to tell you honestly, I tried not to look at the public comments or the blogs a lot, because this hasn't been an easy process for me to go from being loved for giving away data to all of a sudden being not so loved anymore. And so I have never heard any criticism about the San Diego redistricting. We most certainly didn't pack anybody. This entire redistricting was done in public, and there were so many public comments there. I mean, I don't even recall that anybody ever suggested that there was something political going on. What I recall about San Diego most vividly was how incredibly diverse San Diego is, and how many populations just beyond, just looking at race and ethnicity data from the census files, how many communities came out and talked about, the communities you just get through community of interest testimony. They were talking about their neighborhoods and what they were working on together and what united them and how they should stay together and, all the different languages they speak in City Heights and whatnot else. That's really how that was driving that particular redistricting more than anything else. I have no knowledge of any kind of partisan mischief in that particular redistricting. Absolutely not.
One other question, and I've granted a lot of time to other commissioners, so I want to get in this has troubled me for some time, and I thought about not bringing it up, but I'm going to, because if there's a possibility that this award is going to go to you, I want to make sure that my conscience is clear. You were provided an opportunity by the Bureau of State Audits, and again, that's mentioned in your response to our invitation for bid, to come before the Commission as the director of the statewide database. And that was this Commission's first opportunity to be introduced to you. You were then asked, while we remained under the SOS after the first of the year, to come back under Commissioner Dye's chairmanship at that time to present further training to the Commission. At that time that you had presented yourself to the Commission, there wasn't any clarity when you were presenting your recommendations regarding community outreach and the number of meetings and whatnot. And it was during that discussion that you had made a comment that you would be doing so under a different company. And this was the first occasion in which the Commission actually understood that you had a separate potential interest in performing services for the Commission. At that time, I had not one commission member, and it wasn't stated in public that you actually owned a company, and it was called Q2. Then we moved our hearings to Claremont, and at that time, again, you were invited to come and speak before the advisory committee, the Outreach Advisory Committee. And at that time, again, I was not present at the Outreach Committee, but as I understood, you were there in a private capacity. Again, I never heard, nor was it ever reported back to this commission, that you were providing any information, training, expertise, again, as a private company of Q2 Data and Research. And then that omission, from my perspective, led to a suggestion by a commission member to consider a sole source contract to you for the outreach. And that's what led to the public comment regarding the identity of your private company. And what has troubled me for some time is, and like I said, I think this goes to reputation, and I want this out and in the record so I can clear my conscience of this circumstance because it has come up. I never heard about your company, and at the time that it was being presented to this commission, Q2 Data and Research had never been introduced. Now, I think you might have been a little unintentionally misled through invitations to present to this commission as the director of the statewide database. But can you explain to me and confirm for me that there was no intentional omission on your part during the different times in which you had held hats before this commission, or that you've used your position as the director of the statewide database to then garner a contract for Q2? I have to ask the question.
Yeah, and I appreciate it, and that's fair. I have always differentiated between the work that is part of the statewide database and the work that I don't do for the statewide database. And at some point, we kind of crossed over from, talking about redistricting data to doing consulting work. And when I do consulting work, I do it through Q2 Data and Research. And that was actually the same with the Bureau of State Audits. I mean, at some point, it was like, this is really not something that I can do through the statewide database. And because I'm taking vacation time to do this, I would like to be reimbursed for it. So that is really how Q2 came in. You can believe this or not, I'm telling you, when we were sitting in Claremont and all of a sudden there was this motion to do a sole source contract, I said to my team later, nobody's ever asked me whether I want to do this project. And we hadn't talked about whether we wanted to do this project. And obviously, the next day, when there were all of these nasty comments made about me, which I still haven't listened to, I will tell you, I just relied on people emailing me what they were, we were definitely wondering whether or not we wanted to do this contract, because, there's one thing about just helping and really trying to implement a process, and it's another thing to kind of take a lot of political flack for it. And none of us is used to this. None of us. We're not political people. We read about this stuff in the papers. But this to happen to us, I was just blown away. So we kind of went into hiding in between as well, right? So I was really glad when it did go to competitive bid, even though I will tell you it was a lot of work, and, everybody will attest to that. Was there anything intentional? Absolutely not. There are very, very few people that do redistricting, as you know. Do I have an affinity for commissions? Absolutely. I mean, I love it. I'm one of the original suckers for just really lots of public input and really getting people out there to talk about their neighborhoods and their communities. So if there's an opportunity to get involved in a process like that where you can bring people in and actually affect the process, gosh, I'm all over it. And I think that was the tipping point for us as we looked at it, And we really didn't make the decision that we were going to bid on this. We were really on the fence until probably a couple of weeks ago, when we said, okay, we'll take a look at what the bid looks like.
Thank you very much. I certainly hope you understand the circumstance of events, and I wanted to make sure that that was clear, given that we do need to discuss reputation, and that's where I questioned your reputation.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. Commissioner Baraba.
Yes, relative to San Diego, since Commissioner Antai is not here, who comes from that area. Earlier, when all these comments were being made about the misapplication of the redistricting process in San Diego, he contacted the gentleman who was responsible for the commission, and he just sent this note. He says, please forward this email to my fellow commissioners regarding additional reference to Ms. McDonald. I personally talked to Mr. Ralph Pesquera today regarding Ms. McDonald's impartiality. He chaired the San Diego City 2000 Redistricting Commission, an independent city commission appointed by 3 judges. Mr. Piscara, who is a Republican, stated his commission selected all consultants on the basis of their past impartiality. This commission retained the services of the statewide database on the basis of its impartiality and its technical expertise. More specifically, he praised Ms. McDonald for her impartiality in providing the commission with the mapping technology and the outreach services needed by his commission. That was another Republican who was doing the job.
Commissioner Ward?
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to ask, obviously, you've seen the public comments and things like that, and obviously the process has been a bit contentious, which actually I was a little surprised to hear you say that that's surprising to you, with your experience in redistricting and things. Obviously, it's contentious by nature. There's people see things from different sides. So a little surprised to hear that. Was surprised to you, but obviously it is by nature contentious. And I'm wondering, how do you plan to instill confidence in those members of the public that might have perceptions that there's partisanship or things like that, or might have questions that were raised about Q2. What steps do you plan to take to overcome those and instill confidence in all of California?
Thanks. I think first, let me just clarify why I was surprised. I know it's a contentious process, but it was never directed toward me, because usually, it would be you all who would get the contentious comments and not, the person that's basically just implementing your wishes. And that is exactly how I see our job. I mean, it's not our job to do anything other than, what you tell us to do. We run into problems with what you tell us to do. We will tell you. We will show you. We document our work. We're going to be, open and transparent, as we always have been. And that is about the best that anyone can do, I think. I mean, I don't know how many more times, if people still don't believe that I am a declined to state voter, there is just really so much that I can do about it. But, my team and we are just not political people. It's kind of hard to prove that you're not political. It's easier to prove that you're political, because then you've participated in something. It's harder to prove something that you didn't do. And I think that transparency will go a long way, and the result of our work. Because we are not the people making the decisions here. We're just not. You are the people making the decisions.
Commissioner Anton. I'm sorry. Were you finished?
Follow up?
Oh, please.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Over the course of the last this week, I should say, we've also hired VRA attorneys, and similar, concerns and perceptions and things like that were present, as it was a contentious process too. In those cases where there were clearly issues that raised concern, that were tangible, the firms offered ways to safeguard against that. Things were discussed like firewalls and things like that. I realize that's a legal thing and for a legal firm. But in particular with Q2, Bruce Kane is co-owner. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And certainly I understand that you and your team are declined to state. But with all the discussion that went on about Claremont and who donors might be to that college and might not be and all that kind of thing, we really haven't talked about the fact that certainly Bruce Kane is not a declined estate, and he's co-owner of your company. And I'm wondering, besides just being the things you discussed, do you have anything that you could offer as to how we could assure the public that certainly a partisan co-owner of this company wouldn't have any influence or oversight as to your contract?
Sure. I believe that he has submitted a letter to you, and I could absolutely have him formalize that. I mean, again, he lives in D.C. He is out in California maybe a couple of times a year. his interests are in D.C. I think he will probably be working for some attorney general in the redistricting for some other state, East Coast state, as far as I know. And if you would like a more formal statement, we have enough lawyers here that I think we could probably work something up, and we will be willing to sign anything and put it on the front page of any website. Absolutely.
I appreciate that. I did read that letter, and I think the co-owner also endorsed the company, which I thought was a good thing. Beyond that, like I said, there's a large part of California that has particular issues with Bruce Kane. Is there any did you run into this in San Diego? Is there any other assurances or any procedural things that can be done to give more of a, for example, one of our VRA firms offered to have all the other members of the firm sign, a formal document that says, that they are not going to, won't discuss information, things like that. Are processes like that commonplace? Is that something you've done before?
We could absolutely do that. We could absolutely. That's not something that we've ever been asked to do because it just hasn't come up. But absolutely, it's absolutely no problem.
Okay, so you'd be open to if the legal subpanel or something made a recommendation. Thank you.
Certainly.
I appreciate that. I also understand that you were approached by the Rose Institute to do a joint bid and to come to make a bipartisan or I should say a joint proposal for the commission. So there wouldn't necessarily have to be a contentious process made. And I understand that you declined to do that. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to why you declined to do the joint bid. And then I'd also like to know that there's been some discussion about possibly discussing an inline process review. Again, I haven't decided to do that, but it's something that we've discussed. And I'd like to, I'm concerned about your ability to be responsive to that, being that you declined to be willing to put in a joint bid with the other bidder.
Okay. So let me talk about why I thought that a bid with the Rose Institute was not going to work. And we talked about it. I mean, Mr. Johnson and I, we talked about it over many days. And I talked to the members of my team about it. And really, at the heart of it was a methodology concern. About who the members of the Rose Institute teams would be, because it was largely undergraduates. And it got me to the concern that there would be a lot of handoffs of the plans on that end. We really, among this constrained period of time that we had to figure out how to do it, I didn't think we could come up with a good proposal to actually do it jointly. And we designed a proposal that really is a standalone at this point, and I am confident that it will work. So, bringing in somebody that we had never worked with, who uses methodology, with people where we just don't know how much training they have, it just increases the potential error. There are all, as soon as you bring in somebody you've never worked with, you have communication issues that have to be worked out. I think were this a process where we could take more time, had we had more time to perhaps start earlier, that might have been a possibility. My other concern was really that I'm a nonpartisan. I'm a decline to state. And, you can say that there were some people that are concerned about, having Bruce Kane as part of Q2, that he's a Democrat and he drew lines 30 years ago for the Democrats, that is a concern to some people. I mean, the second that I start doing a joint proposal with the Rose Institute, I'm going to have the Democrats shouting that, they want a Democrat on the team. And how do we ever get a proposal that everybody here can work on and that can actually start drawing lines in a timely manner? I just didn't think it was going to go. I just didn't think it was going to work. So I had some serious methodology concerns, and then the partisanship concerns were most certainly there. In terms of peer review, we are so used to peer review. Oh, welcome to academia. I mean, everything we do gets peer reviewed, and you're used to having people, look at everything, looking at your data, trying to replicate everything. If you look at the database, I mean, the database is this is like the epitome of peer review. Redistricting data, publicly accessible, online. Every file out there, everybody just knock yourselves out, take the files, let us know if there's anything wrong with it. That's really how we built this incredible resource that everybody has been using, Democrats, Republicans, and whoever else, and we don't even ask.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. You've sufficiently answered the question.
Okay. Sorry, now here comes the favorite database flag.
Exactly. I knew you were, then you changed hats. Commissioner Anchetta.
Yeah, and I'll echo the remarks about peer review. Academics are used to that, and if you want to see nasty, you should look at peer review on scholarship. It's really nasty. Actually, Commissioner Ward actually addressed my concern, which was regarding Professor Kane, and I'm satisfied that if we were to award the contract, that steps could be taken to prevent any, or firewalling would be sufficient to isolate Mr. Kane, Professor Kane from the team that would actually be working on the line drawing for us. I'm satisfied with that.
Commissioner DiGiulio?
In the same vein, I just, especially when we had clarification previously from Ms. McDonald that he would not, as I understand it, he would not be involved in this process. So I would like to follow up on Commissioner Ward's suggestion that if we do move to have Q2 data, that there be implemented some type of, I don't know if it's a firewall because it doesn't sound like he's involved in the process, but some type of formal notice that says that he will not be involved in the process. That's all I was.
Is that a problem, Ms. McDonald?
No, that's not a problem.
Thank you for that clarification. Mr. Ward, did you have anything further? It appears that our discussion is dwindling, and the chair would invite a motion if we are getting there.
Thank you, Chair. I just didn't feel like, I just wanted an answer to my other question, or just a full answer. I'm curious because I am concerned.
I'm sorry, where is the, again, I just want further clarification as to what we're focusing on. I thought she had sufficiently answered your question as to what I thought was reputation, which I thought was okay, but do you have a new question?
No, I asked about inline process review and her ability to work with others. That's what I'd asked, and she answered in response to that there is peer review available online, and certainly lots of people are watching. But my question was designed to elicit that if this commission does decide that in order to fully offer an added transparent piece by having an inline review, if she's capable and willing to work with them, given that she said she doesn't like, that she feels handoffs and more hands in the pot creates problems.
With all due respect, Commissioner Ward, this was a response to the bid, and it's in her response to our request for bid. And so if you have a directed question based on her response, or the bidder's response, excuse me, to our invitation, I'll certainly entertain that further. Does anyone else have any additional clarification of Q2 data research at this point? No further questions. Is there a motion that should be presented? I'm sorry.
There's a motion on the floor that's been seconded.
Oh, wow. It's been that long, has it? No.
Commissioner Yao, you made a motion an hour or so ago, accept the cost bid proposal for Q2, and Commissioner Forbes seconded.
That was regard to the responsiveness of the proposal, because we started on that, and I don't believe we finished it. Pending input from staff on the review of the cost portion of the input.
I didn't understand that there was a second to your motion, so we moved forward procedurally on whether or not the bid was responsible, and that's where I felt we were at procedurally. There was no second to the motion as I understood it.
There was a second. Commissioner Forbes?
Do you feel that there's a necessity for the motion, or you withdraw your motion and allow?
No, I think procedurally, I suspect that we have gone past that already, because on the basis of the fact that we went to the responsible discussion, but I think formally, we probably should get the staff input as to whether they feel the proposal has met the responsiveness part, and then
we make that determination, and so it would be based on a motion, but we have one that's pending. So procedurally, I'd like to clean this up because I, as chair, missed the fact that there was an actual second. I thought that there was no pending motion, otherwise I would have redirected us to that. So I apologize. I missed Commissioner Forbes' second. So procedurally, we need to deal, and beg my pardon, will you please reread the motion?
The motion is to accept the cost bid proposal from Q2.
The cost bid. Okay.
All right. Let me just to clarify the situation. Let me withdraw any and all proposal motions that I have before the board, and I'd like to for your information, do two motions. The first one is to accept and declare that Q2's proposal is responsive. And after that, I'll introduce
I'll second
the
that.
second motion.
Further discussion from any commission member? This would be a majority vote, and just for your ease, it's not that significant, but it is part of our process. If this commission decides that this would be a necessary vote for the record, we're obviously here to entertain it. Do any other commission members have questions? Commissioner DeGiulio.
I'd like to hear staff's response to staff's determination of responsiveness.
I did have a chance to review it, and it was responsive in the areas that we were asking in the IFB, in terms of the costs and the specific portions of the costs we requested.
Okay. Any other commission member have any discussion on this motion of responsiveness? I will open up to the members of the public regarding this limited motion, as stated by Commissioner Yao, to accept the cost and the bid itself as responsive. Do any members of the public have any wish to comment in that regard? Don't see anybody approaching.
May I have something to distribute from it's from Senator Nielsen. And
okay, under
at the
public.
first response.
Oh, I see. I see. The first public comment, technically. Okay.
This member of the public was present but had to leave and asked us to distribute this letter because he couldn't make the comments directly.
And because he has not had an opportunity to make the comments directly, would he like the comments read into the record?
I don't know, but I think it's fair to post this as we do other comments, and having provided it to you, I don't think the additional step of reading is necessary. I think any commissioner may read it if he or she wishes to do so.
Right now we're in public comment, but technically until I finish reading it, Commissioner Yao. So I'm sorry,
don't
hold
believe
on.
this is pertinent to the...
Hold on, we're in public comment and have not pulled it back to the full commission. Thank you. Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to address this commission on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I will pull it back to the commission. One final comment, Commissioner Yao, on your own motion?
I thought we were discussing as to whether we should read the public comment that was presented before us. I don't believe it addresses the point that we're voting on. We may decide to read it, but not at this point in time.
That's correct. So I did not. So is there, I'll take a vote, please. Roll call vote on this motion.
Commissioner Aguirre?
Yes.
Commissioner Anchetta?
Yes.
Commissioner Baraba?
Yes.
Commissioner Blanco?
Yes.
Commissioner Dye?
Yes.
Commissioner DeGiulio?
Yes.
Commissioner Filkins-Weber?
Yes.
Commissioner Forbes?
Yes.
Commissioner Columbus Malloy.
Yes.
Commissioner Parvenu.
Yes.
Commissioner Raya.
Yes.
Commissioner Ward.
Yes.
Commissioner Yao.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you.
I would further make a motion, further move that the entire proposal, including the responsible portion of the Q2 proposal, be deemed acceptable by the commission.
Just further clarification that this commission would be providing an award to Q2 Data Research. Is that what you mean, Commissioner Yao? Just asking for clarification.
Yes, I think follow the procedure. We have to declare that that the proposal is both responsive and responsible, and then we can proceed to do the award. If you want to do the award simultaneous with this motion, I'll be happy to do that.
Okay, so you wanted to take it in a 3-motion step process, even though you said 2, which the first motion was responsive. Note the second motion is responsible, or are you actually, is your motion to grant the award? Just seeking clarification.
I would proceed and motion and move that we grant the award.
Okay, and that was clarification, and was that in your second, Mr. Forbes?
Acceptable, yes.
Okay. Any further discussion from the commission members regarding Commissioner DiGiulio?
I would like for Commissioner Yao to consider, in addition to that, the addition that we would have some type of firewall with Mr. Kane as a part of our motion, or firewall is the appropriate word. Some separation.
Yes, I do.
Technically, that's an amendment. Mr. Forbes, do you agree?
Accept.
And Council, as I understand it, when the amendment's been done, that's still, an amendment by the mover, that's the main motion, and we may proceed.
You may proceed as the record stands.
Thank you. I will open the floor up to Commissioner Ward.
Can I make an amendment
You can make
to the amended motion?
You can either suggest an amendment for which Mr. Yao may or may not, well, provided you do have a segment, or Mr. Yao can accept your amendment. We would still be working with one motion, or you have the option of making a substitute motion. But the floor is yours.
I'd be most comfortable considering this proposal if we were able to add an inline process review to this motion. So accepting them with an inline process review.
Is that a substitute motion?
No, I'm asking Mr. Yao to consider
I think the intention would be to add to the motion such that we would approve and award the contract, including a firewall as it relates to Q2, and that as a condition of the award, we would concurrently proceed to identify and bring to the Commission an in-process reviewer. Would that be the intent of your motion?
Thank you.
And that's the question, is that's a new motion on the floor?
I will withdraw my previous motion and allow Commissioner Ward to restate a new motion encompassing both the firewall and the in-process review.
Would you like to help with that?
Let me.
Too much.
What we propose is that we accept the bid with the stipulation of a firewall for Bruce Kane, and then immediately proceed to a discussion on determining whether or not an inline process review can be put in place.
That's different than if I could. I believe
I like that
an expression of your intent for the third part of that motion would be that simultaneously with the award of this contract, staff is directed to undertake the process to identify an in-process reviewer and present the results of that work to the Commission to retain an in-process reviewer. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, that works. That's exactly.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion?
Sorry, could you repeat the motion, please?
Ms. Sargis, did you get that or not?
No,
I'm sorry, I made it too complicated.
Yes, I need you, somebody to repeat.
Commissioner
the motion.
Ward, could you please restate the motion and the clarification? I'm a little unclear. Was So the idea is to bundle the awarding of the contract to Q2 and the firewall with a completely separate action, which is to undertake the investigation or pursue an inline review with a separate contractor that's not to be Q2.
My concern is that with all of the public comment that we've all read, I got to get as far as I could to get comfortable and make the public comfortable with the transparency and the unbiasedness of Q2. I'm not suggesting they're not, but certainly a lot of California is. And I think that it behooves the Commission to consider all options to make sure that all of California will be comfortable with this Commission's work. And I understand that in the past we discussed adding the possibility of having an inline process review as part of that. And so in order to feel comfortable voting for this motion, I'm attempting to attach to it identifying an inline process reviewer and consideration of that person. Understanding my intent, I'll reserve from formulating a motion on that right now.
Okay, and let me just see if I can clear this up, Mr. Ward. As I understand it, and Finance Advisory Committee can clear this up, the budget does have an inline peer review process. Mm-hmm. When it was added to the budget at the advisory committee level and at the full commission level, we had discussions of when this individual, the peer review person, should we elect to move forward with that person. They would come in at I would think after we make our first session of maps, is what my understanding was, so that then their sole job will be looking at the job that was done by our technical consultant for ease of the commission, ease of the public's concern regarding what the technical expert, whomever that might have been or whomever it might be, would then do. I don't see that the peer review process is shoulder to shoulder with our technical experts. That's why I don't see the necessity, and maybe you can provide further clarification. We have not prevented the peer review. We don't need to move forward with peer review shoulder to shoulder with our tech expert, as in the manner in which we've discussed it before. The protections for the public and the concern that they may have raised regarding the possible technical consultants that have come to our attention through this bid process would have only been after the initial maps are presented, and then the Commission could consider it. So with that further clarification, and unless I'm wrong and for any Commission member wishes to challenge me in that regard, I would just ask that you reconsider your considered possible motion, if there even really is one. But first of all, am I wrong in that regard? Commissioner Dye, you're shaking your head yes, that you understood.
You're absolutely correct.
Thank you.
We have a budget line item for that. We did agree that this would happen after the selection of our primary line drawer, and that it would also have to go through a competitive bid process. So
we still need to work on that, and Mr. Miller's shaking his head as well. So I don't know that we can add any additional burdens to staff to move forward in that process. So can I? Yeah. Are you withdrawing? If there is a motion, and I'd like it, are you withdrawing and maybe restating what you would like?
Let me restate. I'll actually make a motion then.
Okay. So I thought we had a motion. Just state that you're withdrawing whatever you thought was there, or
I will withdraw my previous motion. I'd like to make a new one, Jay.
Okay. Thank you. Please do.
Thank you. I'd like to move that we accept the bid from Q2 with the creation of a firewall clause, and that we direct staff to prepare an IFB for an inline process reviewer upon acceptance of Q2.
Is there a second? Thank you. No second. I'm sorry.
No second.
Okay. Commissioner Yao, did you have another motion?
Yes. Let me grab the ball back and try it in another way. Like to move that we award Q2 the contract with two amendments. Amendment number 1, create a firewall with Q2's partner, Bruce Kane. And amendment number 2, will work with a peer reviewer of the Commissioner's choice as required.
Is there a second? I'll second. Any further discussion on the motion? Your considered possible motion, if there even really is one, but first of all, am I wrong in that regard? Commissioner Dye, you're shaking your head yes, you understood.
You're absolutely correct.
Thank you.
We have a budget line item for that. We did agree that this would happen after the selection of our primary line drawer, and that it would also have to go through a competitive bid process. So
we still need to work on that, and Mr. Miller's shaking his head as well. So I don't know that we can add any additional burdens to staff to move forward in that process. So can I?
Yeah.
Are you withdrawing? If there is a motion, and I'd like it, are you withdrawing and maybe restating what you would like?
Let me restate. I'll actually make a motion then.
Okay. So I thought we had a motion. Just state that you're withdrawing whatever you thought was there, or
I will withdraw my previous motion. I'd like to make a new one, Jim.
Okay. Thank you. Please do.
Thank you. I'd like to move that we accept the bid from Q2 with the creation of a firewall clause, and that we direct staff to prepare an IFB for an inline process reviewer upon acceptance of Q2.
Is there a second? Thank you. No second. I'm sorry.
No second.
Okay. Commissioner Yao, did you have another motion?
Yes.
You'd like
Let me
to present? Okay.
grab the ball back and try it in another way. Like to move that we award Q2 the contract with two amendments. Amendment number 1, create a firewall with Q2's partner, Bruce Kane. And amendment number 2, will work with a peer reviewer of the Commissioner's choice as required.
Is there a second? I'll second. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay.
Yeah, I've had a problem with the peer review concept for some time now. The state of California spent a considerable amount of money and time to create an impartial commission. I heard from Corinne McDonald that she was going to take direction from us, and that she had no ideas of her own, but she was going to draw lines based on what we instructed her to do. If we feel that there's an issue that surfaces that we would like somebody else to come and talk to us about, we're capable of doing that. But I don't think we need to make a commitment that we need to do that until we get to that issue. So I would just like to encourage Mr. Yao to drop his second amendment so that we can get on with this.
Let me just take the chair's prerogative here. The motion as phrased was that Q2 would work with a peer reviewer. If we never get to the point of actually having a hired IFB peer reviewer, it's inconsequential for the purposes of this motion. And furthermore, the bid as requested is that she's already made a statement that she'll work with a peer reviewer. So frankly, his motion as phrased doesn't add anything, and nor does it further complicate any matter. In substance, the motion as it is to award the contract pursuant to the bid. So I don't want anybody to get diverted in this discussion that his addition that Q2 will work with a peer reviewer. She's already admitted she'll work with a peer reviewer. So there's that's why I seconded it. Let's just move forward. Is there any?
I want to hear the motion.
I will get there. But there is a discussion on the floor. So Commissioner Giulio was next, and then yes, Giulio, then Raya, and then Dye. Okay.
But again, I'm not a legal person, but the way I hear it, that Second Amendment says will work. No, you didn't say as required. We did. Okay. Okay. Because as I understand, we do have that line item, as Mr. Baraba said, and we haven't, as a committee, decided to go down that path. So I just want to make sure if this vote, if this does not tie our hands. Okay. As long as this vote does not tie our hands, then okay.
Commissioner Dye?
So I would just like, if you would accept a friendly amendment, just, it's not as required, if required.
I would move to modify my previous wording from as required to if required.
I agree to that.
You were I was the original seconder, so. You're always seconding, Commissioner Forbes, so.
He pointed to me. I just what can I tell you?
His name on the transcript.
Seconded. I seconded.
Yeah,
She got
that's
it.
when you-
Any further discussion on this motion from any commission member? Okay. I will open it up to the public at this time. How many members of the public wish to speak on the motion on the floor, which is the award? I see one. You've got 5 minutes, sir. Come on forward.
Again, Alan Payton, Chairman of the Contra Costa Redistricting Task Force, having been a city council member where we reduced the number of minutes from 5 down to 3. I won't take even 3. The issue that just came up that I just learned about was this issue of Bruce Kane being partner. I mean, firewalls are great, but perception is key, folks. Having been a city council member, politics, 70% is perception is 70% of what impacts people. You have two different groups here, two different bidders. One was incomplete based on not providing all their database of contributors to their organization in the short time period. You have another one who's declined to state and has some experience statewide, not necessarily in California. It makes sense to combine the two. It makes sense to avoid the appearance of evil to combine the two. Or if you're going to have the motion, you have the one be the key and the other one reviewing it. I think it'd be best for the public perception out there so you all look unbiased and nonpartisan, which is what it's supposed to be, is that you combine the two efforts. And, or at least have one doing it and another one's doing it at the same time, reviewing each other's work, frankly. I didn't know about this issue till today. My issue is more interested in the drawing of lines and based on some principles that we want to present to you when the time comes for that testimony. But this motion seems rather convoluted. This issue of the two bidders, and it appears, I'm just telling you from just coming in today, it appears that there was somebody you wanted and some of you didn't, and you found reasons to eliminate that person, that group. I'm just telling you that's the appearance. I'm hoping that's not the case. But the way to avoid in that appearance is to combine the two. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Payton. Any other member of the public wish to address this commission on the motion to award contract to Q2, et cetera, et cetera?
Davis Oliver again from Berkeley. I'd just like to agree with the previous speaker that the perception issues are very, very key. I'm wondering if going forward, if you do not decide to either combine the bids or to get the third party to look into it, if you might consider working through the outreach committee. And what I'd like to suggest, I don't even know if this is possible as far as the way the Proposition 11 is written, but when I look at the overall picture, I see, as I have said repeatedly, all the usual suspects from the left. I'm wondering if the outreach committee can work with groups like, the Kiwanis, like the Lions Club, like Chambers of Commerce, like California Federated Republican Women, like local GOP committees. I'm not sure if that's possible, but if you go forward in this direction, I would hope that the outreach would be extensive to the people on the other side. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Salver. Any other members of the public who wish to address the commission on this motion? Seeing none, I will bring it back and ask for a roll call vote. Excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry. I always do that. I just assume everybody's on top of the motion at this hour. Ms. Sargis, will you please read the motion back?
The motion is to award Q2 the contract with 2 amendments. 1, create a firewall for Mr. Bruce Kane, and 2, Q2 will work with a peer reviewer if required by the commission.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Aguirre.
Yes.
Commissioner Anchetta.
Yes.
Commissioner Blanco.
Yes.
Commissioner Dye.
Yes.
Commissioner Raya,
Yes.
Commissioner DeGiulio,
Yes.
Commissioner Forbes,
Yes.
Commissioner Galambos Malloy,
Yes.
Commissioner Parvenu,
Yes.
Commissioner Baraba,
Yes.
Commissioner Filkins Weber,
Yes.
Commissioner Ward,
Yes.
Commissioner Yao.
Yes.
It's unanimous. The motion passes.
Thank you and congratulations, Ms. Yes, Cynthia.
I just wanted to task the Legal Advisory Committee to work with Mr. Miller to make that firewall very tight. And it should include not profiting from the
Commissioner Blanco?
from the contract, et cetera. Also, I wanted to respond to the member of the public regarding outreach.
Which you may actually, because it isn't, as I understand it, and Mr. Miller can correct me if I'm wrong, it was a matter that was on the agenda and for the motion, so you are entitled to respond. You're only not entitled to respond when it's issues that are not on the agenda, so please.
Yeah, actually, this was, I was going to defer.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
I was going to defer to Mr. Wilcox to talk a little bit about some of the outreach we're doing to all kinds of groups and entities. Maybe you could just speak to it really quickly.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and would like to assure the public that the Commission and staff are actively reaching out to all communities, many local groups throughout the state of California, ethnic groups, business groups, community groups, neighborhood associations. We are casting as wide a net as possible, and will welcome all of the involvement and actively seeking that through the cities and counties and organizations out there, and wanted to assure everybody that that is happening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilcox. We do have just a circumstance, a procedural circumstance, and to accommodate Commissioner Blanco, who's had an emergency all day. We need a motion that I can sign this contract. So if we can do that while Commissioner Blanco is here.
So
and move forward.
moved.
So moved. Okay.
Second.
Any further? Thank you. Any further discussion on that? No. Open it up to members of the public. Does anyone have a problem with me signing the contract? We're speeding this along. I apologize. And I'm getting punchy because I am tired. So I will bring it back to the full commission. May I have a vote, please?
Yes. Okay. Commissioner Aguirre?
Yes.
Commissioner Anchetta?
Yes.
Commissioner Blanco?
Yes.
Commissioner Dye?
Yes.
Commissioner Raya?
Yes.
Commissioner DeGiulio?
Yes.
Commissioner Forbes? Commissioner Galambos Malloy?
Yes.
Commissioner Parvenu?
Yes.
Commissioner Baraba? Yes. Commissioner Filkins Weber?
Yes.
Commissioner Ward? Yes. Commissioner Yao?
Yes.
Probably wasn't supposed to vote on that, but no.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Blanco, you're free to leave.
Thank you. Good luck.
Go-
Thank you. Good luck.
Madam Chair.
Okay, I can sign this later.
Madam Chair.
I said, no, we're not adjourned. We're not. We're still in session. We are still in session. A couple of things. I would like to open the floor, as we did yesterday, to our new technical expert for a few moments, just for some brief. Oh, I'm sorry. You need to leave? Okay. Are you okay, Ms. McDonald, or do you need to leave? Wonderful. Congratulations on your award. Please come before the commission and make a few introductory brief remarks before we get close to concluding this hearing.
Thank you very much. I am making introductory brief
Yes, you are. You received an award
Okay.
that I will be signing shortly.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate all of the time and effort and work that went into developing this bid. and, you know, the tireless hours that staff have worked and all your diligence in putting this together. I'm very, very happy that this went to competitive bid. I think that was the right thing to do. And I think it was a really transparent process, and I am glad, of course, I think that we were awarded this contract, and I really look forward, on behalf of my team, to working with all of you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McDonald. That concludes the agendized portion of our meeting, with the exception of one final item, or two, actually. Mr. Parvenu, I'm sorry, did you have a comment? Before I open it up, I'm actually going to take public comment.
Yes, I'll be quick. Consistent to how we handled the contract yesterday, I'd like the Commission to consider acknowledging Mr. Doug Johnson for the effort and some demonstration of appreciation for the time and effort that he's put into this contract process. Being an independent declining state, I have a great deal of appreciation for the value he's brought to us, so I suggest that we consider that as well.
Okay. Mr. Miller's not here, and Mr. Claypool's running out. Ms. Sargis, will you please make a note that the Commission has asked for another letter of recognition and appreciation from Mr. Johnson from the Rose Institute regarding all of his time that he has spent with this Commission, which has been on one occasion outside of his capacity as a potential bidder, as well as the time he has spent in the bidding process as well. So please relay that. Commissioner Ward, did you have something further before I
just wanted to ask you, if we did want to take up the, actually have the discussion about an inline process review and resolve that once and for all, do we need to put that on the agenda? Is that something that can be brought up next week? How do we need to go about just making sure that that gets put on the docket and eventually we address it instead of, you know?
I suspect, as what was just done as far as tasking legal advisory, I haven't looked at it and I don't have it in front of me, but it's possible that we can ask technical. I think it is in their line because we have to consider the potential for another competitive bid process. So provided that I would like to task technical to take a look at that. I'm not certain whether it falls within your agendized items for next Thursday in particular, but
I think it would be it was a number of things we wanted to go through, and the time is really tight. But I think and you could work, I think, with Commissioner Ontai, who will chair the next one, to get it into the agenda. I think.
No, actually, Commissioner, when we're going to summarize this as well, Commissioner Maria Blanco will be chairing next Thursday's meeting.
One thing is for the next one. Because I think it may be the one for next week is maybe too full.
Okay, just a procedural issue. Commissioner Ward, send email to Commissioner Ontai as vice chair. As soon as I conclude this meeting, he will be vice chair and then he will be the chair probably at the occasion which can be brought up again. So if it's not properly agendized, you can ask it be agendized for technical. Probably the meeting after the 24th.
And the technical committee will put it on our radar so that it can be addressed.
Yeah, the liaisons will work together. Okay, so that's the process.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Is it? I'm just asking the question. Could staff be directed to put together the IFB for consideration at?
I think it has to go to technical. I think it can go to technical first, and let technical deal with it, and bring it back to the full commission. Then full commission will make a decision to report it to staff.
Thank you.
That's the procedure that we've done previously. Thank you, Commissioner Ward. Anything further from the commission before I open it up to public comment on non-agendized items for the end of the day? Seeing nothing, I will open the microphone to members of the public who wish to address the Commission on non-agendized items, which is our practice. Thank you, Mr. Payton. Welcome again. You have 5 minutes, since I don't see there being a long line.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I won't take that long. Real quick, just one point of procedure. That's not even the right term. It's been years since I've been on the City Council. It's a matter of communication. Your website says, sign up here for email updates. I've signed up. Members of my task force have signed up. We're not getting email updates. So we're having to, it's okay, we're having to go online, look at your website to find out when these commission meetings are happening and letting people know. But that's the main concern I have right now, because we're not getting them on a regular basis. But I do want to say this, because everybody says, oh, being on a volunteer position appointed thing is a thankless task. Thank you for serving, because I know it's been like to do that, and you don't get thanked much, and it's going to be not a fun, or at least not a rewarding per se from a financial standpoint, but it's going to be good. I was involved in the redistricting process in '91 as a volunteer, working on the Bay Area, drawing the lines, testifying before the Assembly Committee, and then after the masters took it on, after the governor vetoed the plan by the legislature, testifying before the three masters in San Francisco. And they actually listened to us and took some of our suggestions. And we're going to come back with some of those suggestions when the time comes of how to draw the lines. And because that is more of my interest from the standpoint of making sure it's fair. But here's the number one principle our task force was formed for, and that is that let the people choose their representatives, not the representatives choose their people. And I believe that's what you're also tasked with. And I look forward to working with you. And now working with Karen and her group, which will be close by there in Berkeley. Thank you for your time, and thank you for the chance to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Payton. Any other member of the public who wishes to address the Commission on non-agendized items? Seeing none. Two final matters. For the members of the public, and since Commissioner Blanco is not here, once this meeting is adjourned, Commissioner Blanco will be the new chair, and Commissioner Ontai will be her vice chair. At this time, we do have an agendized meeting that's posted on the web for March 24th, 2011, most of which will be training and advisory committee meetings. And even though we had to shorten our advisory committee report backs in full discussion, especially like on the calendar for outreach, you will be provided at least, I think, 2 hours, I think, for the committee meetings, and then more time for the report back. And if we go into Friday, which we might very well do now that we can move forward on more business, that should be left open on your calendars to do so. Mr. Wilcox, would you like to provide the summary of today's events?
And may I just clarify with the comments about not receiving email updates, there have been some problems with, there was the transfer from the Secretary of State, so if you were signed up and you're not receiving them now, go back to our website and just sign up at Constant Contact right there on the website. And you
Mr. Payton, did you hear that? Yeah, we had a transition issue with Secretary of State, so thank you for your cooperation.
All right. The California Citizens Redistricting Commission conducted an all-day meeting to consider bids for a technical expert for line drawing. The Q2's bid was accepted as responsive. The Commission then voted and discussed to deem Rose Institute unresponsive due to the failure to disclose donor information and staff conflicts, and was disqualified from further consideration. The Commission then opened the Q2 consulting cost bid and voted to declare Q2's cost bid responsive. The Commission voted to award the contract for technical assistance for line drawing to Q2 Consulting with a firewall provision with partner Bruce Kane, and emphasize that we'll work with a peer review if required by the Commission. That was accepted on a unanimous vote, and then there was a unanimous vote for a motion to sign the contract.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilcox. At this point, in looking at the agenda, it states that public comment would go from 5 to 6. I did a darn good job of getting us out of here on time. So, if there's nothing further, I would ask for a motion to adjourn. Unless there's one final matter.
Can I say a big thank you to Chairwoman? This was a tough couple days, and I think you did an excellent job. So I appreciate your dedication and diligence with everything that happened.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Further business?
Move that he does it again next.
No, sorry, motion fails. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. We are adjourned.